Okay, I think we can get started now, right, Donna?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Amazing. Thanks again, Donna, for joining us today to unveil the State of Customer Onboarding Survey. For those who joined, thanks for joining in today. Obviously, Donna needs no introduction if you're in customer success or onboarding, but she's the expert on customer onboarding and has written a book, Onboarding Matters. I'm sure a lot of you have bought it already and have been poring over it. So,
Thank you so much, Sri. Got it right
there you
here.
go. Yeah. So if you haven't yet bought the book, do get a copy. 5 lucky winners today are also gonna get a chance to win a copy of the book. So that's also in it for those who joined today. So you may be one of them. Yeah, let's get started here. So Donna, I think this should be your favorite slide of the day. We wanted to start with setting the stage. A lot of people here have obviously joined because they understand that onboarding is important in the customer's journey. But we'd love to hear from you. You've written a book, that Onboarding Matters. So why does customer onboarding matter? Tell us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And let me just change there we go. So first of all, thank you for including me, Sri and Rocketlane. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be here. And thank you for everyone on the session today for making us a part of your day. It's really great to share what I'm passionate about with you. So onboarding matters because, what happens is that most customers churn because they fail to launch. So it's not just about going live with your product. You really need to get customers to value. So that's from the customer side. I see so many companies that are really proud of their customer success organizations, yet they're still very internally focused. They're still not focused on the customer. And I want to change that. I'm really passionate about engaging, enabling, and driving customers to value. And then on the internal side, I see a lot of companies that are high growth, doing really well. We got the high five going on here. They're high fiving because they keep getting a lot of new customers, but they're treating every customer as a special snowflake. All of that new revenue that the sales and marketing teams work so hard to bring in is being eroded because it's taking so long to get customers implemented, onboarded, and adopting the product. So type in yes, if that's the case at your company, that onboarding is taking too long. All right, so getting lots of yeses that onboarding is taking too long. So we'll talk some about that. Great. All right, let's carry on.
Awesome. So we thought we'll start with Donna, you telling us a little about this model that you built for customer onboarding as a maturity curve, right? So I'm sure there are companies of all kinds who've joined us today with very early stage teams, with sort of mature teams already in the mix. What does the journey to maturity look like? And that's a place we can get started.
Well, I think this is a great place to start. So we have the customer onboarding maturity model, and I leverage this from a company called Service Rocket. So it's another rocket company, not related to Rocketlane. But this is a maturity model based on similar maturity models where you have 4 stages: reacting, performing, scaling, and optimizing. And we've got that reacting stage is like everything's very ad hoc. You may not have clear processes. Every customer is a special snowflake. You're running around with your hair on fire, fixing problems. Type in reacting if that sounds familiar to you and your team. The next stage up is performing, and that's where you have some clear processes and playbooks, and everyone's engaging in a similar way with customers. You might be on a cusp from reacting to performing, or a cusp from performing to scaling. Scaling is when you're starting to leverage technology to deal with a one-to-many approach. And then optimizing is where you're really able to demonstrate your impact on the business, that you know that, for example, your onboarding customers that go through onboarding are, X% more likely to renew, to buy more, higher customer satisfaction. So let's hear where you are. We're getting lots of reacting. So type in if you're in reacting, performing, scaling, or optimizing, or somewhere in between. All right. Yeah, so we've got the some folks with a special snowflake. We have some reacting to performing, some scaling. We're working the way to scaling, and that's great because often when you're entering the scaling stage is when technology really makes sense. Thank you for sharing.
Awesome. So before we get into the survey and the results, and get Donna's thoughts on some of the findings from the survey, we thought we'll quickly touch upon how we went about the survey itself. So we spoke to customer onboarding specialists and implementation managers, customer success folks like yourselves in many companies. Over a 40-day period, we got over 100 respondents. These are some of the companies that had people participating in our survey. And that was sort of how we arrived at the results. So we'll get into the key findings and have Donna's thoughts on some of these. Right. Here's the first one. We asked, what are your top challenges with onboarding new customers? And here's what we saw. Making customers accountable for your work was like the top challenge from the participants, with coming in at 58%. Managing expectations of the customers came next. Establishing the right level of transparency was the third, and getting customer feedback was the fourth. So Donna, is this in line with what you've seen, and how do people deal with these challenges? How should teams deal with these challenges?
Thanks for asking, Sri. So, we're in the era where we know we have, as consumers, we have transparency. At least in the US, if you order a pizza, you get updates on your phone. Hey, they're putting the cheese on, they're putting the pepperoni on, it's going in the oven, it's being loaded into the van. And, you order something online, you can track its every move until it arrives at the door. You get a photo when your package arrives at the door. So as people, as consumers, we're expecting that kind of transparency and partnership with the people that we do business with. And the reality is that when we're working with businesses, B2B, business to business, whether they're small, medium, or large, we're still dealing with people. And more, we need to partner with our customers during this crucial onboarding period. So onboarding needs to not be the black box. It needs to be like, hey, we'll go live. Too many times I meet with companies where, customers don't know what's expected. They don't know what's needed. They don't know, that they don't even know that the whole implementation is being held up because they haven't provided the right information. So there's a need to partner with customers. When I've interviewed the customers of companies I work with, they tell me that they want to be held accountable. They want to partner. They need that transparency. As you are, our customers are very busy with a lot going on. And so we need to be a lot more proactive and explicit about this whole relationship, especially during onboarding.
Perfect. So the transparency in itself is going to help with the expectation management as well as holding the customer accountable. Here is what we heard as the top reasons for escalations during implementation and onboarding journeys. Number one is, no surprise, low visibility into the progress. That then comes poor customer experience, missed deadlines, defective software. Unfortunately, that's something that people just need to deal with, as every software is going to have its defects, and mismatch in expectations. So Donna, what's your take on this? Is this in line with what you're saying? What are the costs of having these escalations and these reasons exist?
Well, what I see, and a big thing I talk about in the book, Onboarding Matters, is that too many times the deal closes and companies jump right into the technical weeds of deploying the product. And what happens is that you get right into all these challenges and technical details. There's APIs to connect, there's data to migrate and clean, and that gets very overwhelming for customers. So it's really important that we slow down and build a relationship with the customer first. And in my orchestrated onboarding framework, we do that in the stages 1 and 2 in embark and handoff. And so it's important to help the customer understand the big picture first. Where are we going? What the expectations are? What the timelines are? What the deliverables are? And so that you're really building that established relationship. I talk about the trough of disillusionment, where during the deployment, during the implementation, customers fall into this trough because it often takes a long time and they're hanging out in the dark. They don't know what's happening. So it's really important to help them understand the journey ahead and help them understand what's expected of them, and then communicate that regularly. And what happens, companies that I've worked with, is that they, when customers don't get those things that I just talked about, then they pause and cancel their subscriptions, often in those first 30 days. Sometimes they're really frustrated, and then you're spending so much time winning back their love. First impressions matter, first impressions count. So we need to start off on a good footing, on a positive relationship. And when we do, then customers will handle those challenges with implementations that will invariably come up along the way.
Perfect. And that makes so much sense, because I guess for a lot of companies, the default new motion is to land and expand. And if your landing is smooth, obviously that means better, faster, confident expansion from the customer, and hence, better NRR. And that's turned out to be one of the most important metrics that every SaaS company is tracking. So, Donna, I think what you said makes a lot of sense in terms of the visibility and showing the customers the path so that they're not stuck in that trough of disillusionment. So we asked, how do your customers keep themselves informed about the project status? And it seemed like an overwhelming 60% plus rely on project managers sending out like weekly reviews to the customer. And very few have like a self-service customer portal where they can stay up to date or have scheduled reports arrive in their inbox automatically. This is the current state of things. What's your take on what's the right way to do this job?
Well, so I work with companies to optimize the customer onboarding process and program. But if you don't operationalize it, you'll be in trouble. I worked with a company, they have a supply chain management. They are like a B2B to B2B platform. So there's a lot of moving parts. And when I first started working with them, I said, well, show me all your current onboarding kind of assets and content. And I found, spreadsheet after spreadsheet where they tried to define this, their onboarding program over and over and over. But what happened, it was just lived on a sheet, on a Google Drive somewhere, and nobody really ever referred to it. So it needs to be operationalized. It needs to be part of everybody's workflow. It needs to be part of the management's review of the reports. Otherwise, it's just an idea that never gets implemented. And if it doesn't get implemented, then it won't have any impact. The reality is a proactive, prescriptive customer onboarding process can really drive customers to initial value and then to maximize their lifetime value. So you need to not just build a great process, but you need to operationalize it and have it be part of the way your team works and your company works.
Makes sense. And Donna, there's a question I'd like to pose at this point. I'm sure a lot of folks who joined today are looking for putting in place better processes, putting in place better technology as well to drive those processes. What would you say is the best way for them to secure budgets to go after and really find the right consultants to help them level up on the process front, or procure the right tooling for their teams?
Yeah, why don't we go to the next slide, because I think that would kind of help be a good tie-in. So sometimes you're like, well, we don't have budget to get an expert to come in and work with, or we don't have budget to get a tool. Oh, we got some spreadsheets, or we'll make it work in our existing tools. But you need to look at what it's costing you. So for example, today I talked with a company in the UK, and their current onboarding time frame is 10 weeks. It used to, is 8 weeks. It used to be about 12 weeks. So I've been working with them. And now they want to get it from 8 weeks down to 4 weeks. And so the first thing we want to know is, well, what is that costing you? So many companies are so busy looking at all the new revenue, the new bookings that are coming in. But if those new margins, if all those margins are eroding because you're spending so much time and money to onboard every new customer with special care, then your company's never going to get ahead. So I like to really understand, what is each implementation costing you? So maybe you find out every implementation is costing $10,000. I like to start with big round numbers. But if you reduce it, to 4 weeks, then it's going to cost you $5,000. What can you do at that time? In addition, like a lot of customer success teams and onboarding teams can't scale. I work with these high growth companies. This company I met with today, their goal is to increase revenue by 250% in 2022. So, then if all you're doing is throwing new bodies on the onboarding teams and the customer success teams to keep, the current ways you're doing things, you're not going to get ahead. It's just too expensive. So that's why we it's good to know, what's the current process costing you? How many support tickets are being logged? How much kind of one-on-one white glove, high touch is needed? Are there ways that you can move to lower touch or even scale to a digital touch? That's going to all save you a lot of money down the road. And investing in tools and expertise is, it's an investment, not a cost, because it means you can save so much and really drive more revenue, more value for customers, and it's going to just keep compounding.
Makes a lot of sense. And Donna, if you look at this slide, this was about like the top areas where there is scope for improvement for project reporting per the respondents to the survey. Insights and patterns of, across projects is one thing that obviously sticks out at the top. Have you seen companies really recognize these patterns using tools and come up with ways to cut down costs? How do you, can you give us an example of how you brought down onboarding time from 12 weeks to 8 weeks, and how do you go about planning for 8 weeks to 4 weeks next?
Sure. Well, let me just talk a bit about what's on this slide, and then we'll talk about optimizing the customer onboarding process. So too many times, like every CSM or onboarding specialist, they might have visibility into things from an account level. I talked with a chief customer officer a couple of weeks ago, and every onboarding specialist, they call them transformation managers at this company. Every transformation manager is like heads down on their accounts, and they know how things are going, but there's no visibility at all into what's happening across the accounts, what's happening with onboarding from the initial stages to later stages of onboarding. How long is it taking? Maybe all the customers that go through onboarding with one person get to value much more quickly versus everyone else on the team. Let's find out what they're doing, what's working, what's not working, what are the blockers. So management really needs to have this insights and patterns and trends. You need to be able to establish that baseline and then look at what's going on to start changing it. So that's where, these are top areas for improvement, because you need that understanding of things from a higher level. And when I work with companies, we really look at, well, what are we doing now? We look at what the blockers are, what are the obstacles, and then I look at how we can really shorten the time for customer value. So for example, I worked with a company that provides a marketing platform for real estate agents. And the real estate agents, our clients, weren't getting to value till about week 4 or maybe 6, because they really didn't engage them till the platform goes live. But working together, we looked at how can we start delivering value from day 1. And when we started exploring what some initial value or quick wins might be, we realized that what sets this company apart is not just their awesome software, but the premium services that they have. They have this exclusive community, they have thought leadership. And so now from day 1, we get the new clients engaged in the community, benefiting from the content, starting some strategic coaching with their CSMs. And then when the platform goes live, they're ready to be off and running. And so that really is reducing the paused and canceled subscriptions and the customer frustration.
Perfect. So we'll go on to the next one. So we talked about this earlier, Donna, but the real cost of onboarding problems that we are seeing across the board, low visibility into progress, lack of insights. So this is about continued performance, subpar performance in terms of time it takes to onboard a customer. Poor internal external transparency obviously also means the customer feels lost, is in that trough of disillusionment for longer. And of course, all the chaos it causes leads to stressful days before you actually start getting to that value. So moving on to the next one, we also asked people what their top implementation goals for 2022 were, right? And here's what we heard. Donna, would love your thoughts on the answers you see here.
Well, obviously improve customer experience is top, and standardizing the process is next. Those, to me, to be honest, are internally focused. I know improve the customer experience as customer, but it's still like, well, what do we think we can do? To me, shorten time to value needs to be there. That needs to be a key metric, because let's say, Shri, I'm working with you in Rocketlane, and it's a lovely experience. Your team is awesome. Your product's great. I like the people I work with, but if I'm not getting to value, I'm going to move on. So I would like to see shortening time to first value up there on the top, because, if I get some value, it's going to give me an endorphin hit, and it's going to help me stay engaged, even if the implementation time is long and challenging and frustrating, because, I know that what you do works. For example, let's say I go see a personal trainer. Those of you who have worked with me know I like to use gym and training analogies. And so, maybe the trainer's nice, they're charming, they're lovely to talk with. I'm having a great customer experience, but maybe instead they're challenging to work with, and I come home tired and sore, but I'm seeing results in those first couple of weeks. Okay, maybe I could barely walk, but I know this stuff is working. I'm going to stick around. So that's where we need to be. We need to be a lot more proactive. We need to be prescriptive. I've worked with customer success and onboarding teams who have been letting the customers guide the experience. And it's all about making customers happy, which I don't agree with. We need to drive them to value. That's why we are working with them in the first place. We need to, rather than letting the tail wag the dog, we need to tell them these are the best practices. This is how we do it. This is what we know drives success.
I think that was an amazing analogy in terms of the gym trainer getting you to results, whether you like the style of coaching or not. You got the results, then you're gonna go back to them again. So makes a lot of sense to me.
I might be cursing them, but that's what I want. I want the results.
Yeah, they made it work for you. And one of the things we were thinking of, would love your comments on this as well, Donna, is as we start working with a whole bunch of companies, we are trying to see if one of the goals we can set for them is to make their implementation and onboarding journey PR worthy. To say, hey, we sort of know what it takes to get there. we have this methodology. We know how to get them to value faster. And it seems like, at least in a certain set of verticals, let's say HR tech, supply chain, etc., where there's complex onboarding journeys, a lot of integrations involved, and so on. It feels like customers are scarred by the previous experiences they had with vendors, and so companies need to make it part of their marketing to say, hey, we do better onboarding, we know our process, we know we can get you to success faster. And that's sort of one goal we want to take on ourselves, to help customers who come our way to get them to a PR worthy implementation journey. What do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, Shri. The thing is that your customers own you. It's a consumer. We're in the midst of a consumer revolution, and so it's no longer just about your awesome product. It needs to be about the experience as well. This one colleague I have, Jason, from the two Jasons, he talks about, I talk about my trough of disillusionment. He talks about the valley of despair. I'd like everyone to type in your average or the range of how long it takes to implement your products. But let's say it takes 14 weeks to implement your product. It's important to communicate with the customer. He calls it the valley of despair. You're going to fall into the valley of despair, or we're going to be in that valley and then we're going to come out and then we're going to fall into it again. And it's important to help them know, like, hey, we're partnering for this. Software products are becoming more and more commoditized. So it's more about the relationship. It doesn't always have to be a high touch relationship. That could be a digital relationship, but that needs to be an important part of how we work with companies. And so let's see, I'm seeing 5 to 8 business days from Colleen. That's pretty short, but we got 4 to 6 weeks. We've got 5 to 6 weeks, 30 days. So the folks in this group, we have 18 weeks from Christine, and 2 weeks. It's about an average of 30 days from this group, which is actually not too long. But that's really important to start providing value even before those 4 weeks are up. Start thinking, like, what's the value you can start providing in the first week?
And I think someone had also asked a question about what's the time frame for a successful onboarding process. And I understand it varies for different companies, but what we look at, I think from a SaaS point of view, we've also seen the same, 3 to 6 weeks as sort of the typical range that most companies have. But the 3 weeks, those who aim for 3 weeks end up sometimes going all the way to 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
Right.
Those who aim for 6 weeks probably double of that, and there lies the problem. But yeah, that very in line with the answers typed out in terms of what they're aiming for as the length of their journeys. Cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about 3 pillars of customer onboarding, right? So one is all of you who joined here, the people involved, and then there is the process, and then technology that enables. So Donna, your commentary on the 3 pillars of onboarding.
Well, I generally like to start with the processes, like look at what's working, what's not working, and start optimizing that. And then that often will inform what kind of people we need. So, oftentimes, not always, but I'll work with companies to build out more of a higher touch onboarding framework, a proactive prescriptive onboarding framework. But we might find, hey, we need some more people. We might need specialists. Oftentimes when I work with smaller companies, it's a bunch of generalists who are being technical and managing the account. So maybe a first step would be to start to specialize, have some onboarding or implementation specialists, or we look at where and when the people are engaged and move that around to be have the most impact. And then once we get that processes and people defined, then that's a great time to bring in technology. To be honest, I see a lot of companies see some great marketing from some great tools, and they think that they can put technology in place and that's going to fix it. And sometimes that can only kind of make things more challenging, because if let's say you implement some technology, but you don't even know what you're doing or why. So that's generally the flow I like to do, is start with process, people, and then technology. And then also, let's say we get a higher touch optimized onboarding program, and then we can start looking at opportunities to scale with technology. Sometimes we'll go process to technology, where, hey, we got the right people in place, we need to operationalize this, and we'll move into technology.
Yeah, very similar to what we see with our customers. Well, very often they come in to buy, and then when we try to help them set up, they realize that, hey, I don't have my process in place. It's going to take me longer to first set that up and then translate it into the product. And that's where I think this comes in. So those of you who are yet to, put together a proper process for your onboarding, or you're looking at ways to really level up on the process front, obviously, the book Onboarding Matters is a great resource for you. If you haven't read it yet, get your hands on it and read it already. And there are more resources, of course, right? So we have Preflight, a community that we run, preflight.cx. I'll just type it into the chat. Oops. I'm going to recommend those of you who are interested. Donna's also in the community, by the way. You can join in and, listen to others, what problems your peers are going through, how they are solving them. We have like 2 events a month. We have local cohorts where, people get together and meet and discuss these as well. So join preflight.cx, one more way for you to level up on process. And once you have your process set, obviously, the next thing could be, hey, do we have the right people for the process? As Donna said, hire them, and then comes tech, right? And here's what we learned from the survey as well, that people are struggling to stay on top of their process because they're using multiple tools for onboarding, right? They have Slack and Notion and Trello board and whatnot for every customer.
And if I can interrupt, can you everyone type in how many tools you're using for onboarding currently as Sri is talking?
Oh yeah.
Great.
Three.
Thanks.
3s and 4s.
Too many from Krista. 8. Oh my God, who did 8? We got to talk, Christine. And we got at least 6 from Lottie. And then we've got none from Louisa. So yes, yet to have 1 from Lakshmi. So 6 from Brooke. So, the thing is, when you have all those tools, you're missing that bigger picture. So you don't really know what's working, what's not working. This, as the chief customer officer I met with, he said, some people are tracking onboarding in Jira, some people in spreadsheets, some people like on their local drive. One company I worked with, everyone was capturing everything on their local computers. And it's like, oh my God, that is such a liability, because if something happens to their computer or they leave, like, you're just completely in the dark.
Absolutely.
We've got a couple 0 from Siva and Donna.
Yeah, I guess that means there's too many tools and they don't have one tool that they're focused on. But yeah, I think
and then you're so busy logging in different tools, you're not really engaging the customer and partnering with them.
Yeah, and you're probably also having to fetch information from these tools and send it to your manager, who's asking you, hey, what happened to this onboarding? Just because there's no central place where you have all of it captured and tracked, and the leader of the org can't just go to one place and look it up on their own, right? They need to know which spreadsheet, which Notion doc, which Slack channel to look in to find the true status of a project. So we believe therein lies one of the key problems that we are trying to solve. A little bit of introduction to Rocketlane as well. As part of this, we obviously did this survey for a reason, and we believe that if you're stuck with spreadsheets or regular project software, then you have a bunch of problems, right? So with spreadsheets, of course, as a leader or even an individual managing multiple projects, you're going to have to switch between these spreadsheets all the time to understand what's happening in each project, what your next actions are. It's harder to collaborate effectively with the customer. You're sending across the spreadsheets back and forth. Are you working on the right version? And then communication is happening separately outside, right? Like on a Slack channel or email. There's no automated alerts to you about tasks that are going overdue. So it's harder to keep that customer in check and accountable on things that are on their plate. And of course, there's zero insights and reporting for you to understand what's going wrong. So when we look at that spreadsheet, you think, hey, this is a unique situation, and that's why this problem is happening with this customer. Little do you know that every onboarding journey across your company is facing a similar problem at the same step. And that can only come out when you're using a purpose-built tool, right? Likewise, for project management tools, you really don't have a way to have that right level of sharing with the customer. There's no, it's all or nothing. So all your internal checklists and tasks are also shared with the customer if you want to bring them in, or you just decide, hey, I'm not going to bring the customer in. I'm going to take a screenshot from my project tool, put it on a PPT and send it across to the customer, because there's no portal where the customer can come and see where they are in the journey and have that shared accountability with you. And again, insights, benchmarks, what's working, what's not, is not something you're going to get automatically from a regular project tool. And that's where Rocketlane comes in. We're going to come back to the survey, but for a moment, we're just going to play out to you folks what it is that we do. There's a quick intro. Here we go.
When onboarding new customers or running customer-facing projects, customers become the center of your universe. How do you ensure you hit your onboarding goals and deliver an awesome experience every time? Enter Rocketlane, a purpose-built customer onboarding software. It brings project management, document collaboration, and communication into one experience. One tab. Keep work centrally organized, improve visibility and collaboration, and bring consistency in your execution. Let's take a look. Rocketlane gives you visibility across your active projects. A quick glimpse at the dashboard shows you the current status, your CRM data, and the latest CSAT for all projects. Create custom views that give you the business and execution insights you need in seconds. Leaders love this. As for your customers, they shouldn't need more tools and document links just to stay in the know. Give them access to the project through a beautiful customer portal. You can make it your own with your domains, logos, and colors. And then invite customers with magic links. No passwords or signups. All the tasks, documents, status updates, and approvals available in one single place. Oh, and you can even send automated reminders and status updates directly to their inbox. Convenient, isn't it? Rocketlane lets you codify your best practices with templates. Once set up, you can create projects from templates with just a few clicks. Use the presentation mode to take your customers on a visual project journey. Add tasks, subtasks, and dependencies to capture the tiniest details and get notified when things go off the track. Rocketlane lets you embed your documents through spaces, set the access level, have live conversations, and collaborate right inside the platform. You can even mark your work as private or shared, and define what's visible to whom. No more separate copies for customers. No more link hunting in inboxes. No more juggling spreadsheets for every customer to know what's on your plate. Lastly, it comes with built-in time tracking. Your team can log billable hours and give you visibility into their workload. Managing resources can get easier. It helps you track hours spent on different projects, get accurate timesheets, know your team's bandwidth, all within Rocketlane. Rocketlane puts the customer back in customer onboarding. It streamlines the implementation and helps you deliver a 5-star experience to your customers. Think customer onboarding. Think Rocketlane.
Thanks, folks. Brief commercial break, and we're back. Yeah, so this is what we really help with, right? Like all of the things that Donna covered in terms of insights across projects, getting to that consistent execution, automations where possible, and overall elevating the customer experience, and really being able to plan and monitor better. So we have the full report as well available on our site, rocketlane.com/state of onboarding. You can, go there to get the entire report. But now we can take questions since we have Donna for a few more minutes. Questions from folks over here. So we have 3 questions already. We'll start there. Unless Donna, did you have anything else to add before we get into the questions?
No, I'm ready. Fire away.
All right. So how much does the cultural or geographic location of a customer affect their onboarding experience? This is from Udit.
Well, it's really important to know your customers and knowing what they want and need. So the cultural experience might be that you're working with, data scientists or developers versus accountants. So it doesn't always have to be a geo-cultural difference. So as folks who have been to, have worked with me or have attended other sessions I've delivered, it's really important to know what your customers want and need. So have some customer interviews, pick up the phone, schedule a Zoom meeting, and ask them what's important for them. So just because it works with one user type, user persona, one geo, doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody.
Cool. Here's the next question. What tools would you advise for onboarding technology? That comes from Diego. In terms of dedicated tooling for onboarding?
Yeah, my answers, I have to say so often is it depends. It depends on what size you are. It depends on how simple or complex your onboarding and implementation is. The more complex your implementation is and the more and the longer it is, then I do recommend having a dedicated tool for customer onboarding like Rocketlane. If you have a small team and it's not so complex, then you can likely build out custom objects in your CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot, or your CS platform like Tatango or Gainsight. So it really depends. And it might be leveraging Confluence or Jira. So it depends on priorities about what you have, what's needed, and where you're going.
Got it. Here's the next question. What do you find is the best way to prepare customers for what is expected of them?
So generally, I like to help them understand the journey ahead. And in the book, I believe I talk about this in like chapter 15. Oftentimes the companies I work with, it's very technical, but it's helpful for people to understand what the journey is ahead of them through visuals. So when we map out and optimize customer onboarding process, the first thing we do is define it in a very visual way. So for example, my onboarding framework has 6 stages, the orchestrated onboarding framework, which is embark, handoff, kickoff, adopt, review, and expand. But when I work with companies, we tailor that to map to your business, your branding, and make it very visual. So then, we can see like, oh, this is the path we're on together. And then you can dive into the details for what each stage involves. And that implementation or adopt stage might be several months with lots of different things going on. But in order to help that partnering relationship and accountability, kind of lift everything up first before you dive into all the details and help them understand the bigger picture, milestones, deliverables, and timelines.
Perfect. Here's an interesting one. In a B2B2C context, how do you measure time to value? Is it implementation of your platform or adoption of it from their users?
The time to first value needs to be from the user perspective. So for example, with the company that provides a real estate, a marketing platform for real estate agents, the initial value had nothing to do with their platform. And so we looked at, well, and their sales cycle is quite short and the implementation is fairly short. So we need to deliver some quick value immediately. So in this case, the initial value has nothing to do with the platform, and it has everything to do with the services. So, it might be that you're going to do some work for the customer. I've talked with companies where what really delays the product going live is like the data migration. I've worked with one company where their users are like academic institutions, and even saying the word data just sets their customers' heads off in a tailspin. So, it's all about how can you make things quicker and easier for your customers? So maybe you don't call it data, maybe you just say, hey, we're going to get all your student information. We're going to do that for you. Maybe you charge more for that. So, it's really about knowing what your customers want to need and how you're going to get them to value. What are some low-hanging fruits that you can start to drive towards? And it's not like, well, we hope they get there. You need to then build in the onboarding process how you're going to drive that behavior to get to value quickly.
All right. And here's the next question. We'll take a couple of more questions. Here we go. How do you plan handle when multiple vendors are involved in an onboarding and dependencies are present?
Oh yeah, that is a hard one. I've worked.
Is that something you covered in the book?
Well, no, I have worked with several companies where it's like, well, we can't even get started because it's third-party vendor, which can be so frustrating. But I'll give you some examples of what I've done. One is to start gathering that information or letting them know what you need even before the sales cycle ends. So if you need to be off and running the minute the deal closes, then start onboarding during the last stage or stages of the sales cycle. So for example, that supply chain management company I worked with, we moved onboarding to start in the last 2 stages of the sales journey. And so we could start, because it was very dependent on these third-party vendors giving all of these information. So we could start collecting that information. And then as soon as the deal closed, internal teams could be off and running because they couldn't even recognize revenue until the product went live. Start letting customers know, look, we're going to need you to, integrate with this. You need to set up this payment gateway. It takes 5 weeks. Let's get started now. You're going to need to migrate your data. Let's get it cleaned up now. So whatever there's blockers happening downstream, I move it all upstream so that we can address it sooner, so that it's not holding us up down the downflow.
Oliver asks a question on, and maybe, a broader way to phrase this could also be, when does it make sense to have a separate onboarding manager, onboarding team, during the onboarding phase from the, keep it separate from the CSM? When is it right to break that into 2 parts?
Well, as always, my answer is it depends. If your team is small, then you'll likely have more generalists. But as you grow, then it makes sense to start specializing. I am working with a company in Hungary and Romania. Anyone from Hungary or Romania area on the call? So they were having folks who were super technical and folks who weren't technical, all working kind of as CSM/account managers. And the technical folks would dive into the details and not really do that strategic relationship thing. The more people-focused folks would be more focused on the business relationship and weren't so strong on the technical. So then I suggested it's time that we, have folks specialize. So there's a time where it starts to make sense. There's no right or wrong there, but if your product's especially technical, I've also worked with companies where they would close the deal and then they would have the onboarding specialist or the implementation person do the implementation, and then the CSM would engage after the go live. And in that case, I often say, let's engage the CSM up front, because too often the customer keeps hanging on or hugging on the implementation or onboarding folks, because that's who they've initially built a relationship with. So I like to bring the CSM or account person in up front, develop like this high level partnering strategic relationship that we've talked about, provide that high level overview. Then they do a handoff to the implementation and onboarding team, dive into those that onboarding focus, and then it gets handed back to the CSM. So that's and then that way the implementation and onboarding team can be totally heads down on that technical adopt phase and not keep getting pulled into account management stuff.
Got it. Here's another good one. How do you keep the customer engaged and active throughout the onboarding process? Any tips you have for that, Donna?
Well, a lot of it is how you start, where if you tell them, it's all about setting the right expectations. So if you tell them this is how we work together, we're going to have working meetings, we're going to need to meet twice a week, this is what I'm expecting of you. So setting the right expectations up front. Another is leveraging a tool like Rocketlane, where so that, they see what they need when they need it. So they're engaged along the journey. And another way is to charge for your onboarding, because guess what? When people pay for something, they're more likely to be engaged and they're more likely to ensure they get value from it. I worked with a company that provides workflow and process automation platform, and they found that when customers paid for onboarding, that they had showed up for their meetings and they were more accountable and they met all the deliverables and deadlines and completed their tasks. So consider charging for your onboarding. Why don't folks type in whether you charge for onboarding?
My guess
Fee,
is we're going to
type
see a
in
lot of
fee or free if you charge for charging. So a lot of free. So we got some fee. Okay, we're getting more fees than I expected. Great idea. Depends. Great. And do they know that they're paying for it, or is it all included? So if they think customers might think it's free, but it's actually, you're charging, make sure they know that they're paying for it. Great. Krista says it's outlined on the contract. Oh, and what Chris is talking about in the contract, one company I worked with, the CFO was purchasing a product. So he just shared the story that during the sales cycle, this company said, here's your dedicated customer success manager. Here's our onboarding process. Here's what we're going to do for you, the time it takes. Here's what we need from you and how long it takes you. That was all in the contract. So you're being really clear up front. Don't keep your awesome onboarding as your best kept secret. Let them know this CFO said, this company's got their act together. I want to work with them. So it shortened their sales cycle. So setting as much expectations as you can up front, even during the sales cycle, is really going to help build all that customer engagement.
Cool. There's a question from James. How often do you think you should reach out to a client who's ghosting you? I think if you're charging, hopefully they wouldn't, but
yeah.
Any thoughts?
Oh, it's so hard to know, but I would say if you start off on the right foot, they shouldn't be ghosting you. If you follow the orchestrated onboarding framework, then you have a success plan. You've captured risks. You've determined escalations. Then that wouldn't be a challenge. It's really important that you have the contact info for more than one contact at the companies you work with. That needs to happen like in the first week, so you're not dependent on one person. So for example, when I work with companies, I get the stakeholders contact info. If we're having issues, I pick up the phone and call them. Oftentimes it's the CEO or the CCO, and I call them and say, hey, this person's not showing up for meetings, or these are the blockers, or we need to escalate. So I deal with it right away. I don't wait for issues to drag on. My job is to provide value. So if I'm blocked from providing value, I need to address that immediately.
Yeah, and I think your sales teams are your friends there. They know how to bring back a customer who is ghosting. So chat with them. I'm sure they have the phone numbers of all the right people.
Good point, Sri. Yeah, so maybe you pick up the phone and call the buyer. And hey folks, pick up the phone. Another email, doesn't work. Emails don't work anymore. When I want to talk to someone, I pick up the phone and just call. It's okay. Okay, so we've got like time for maybe one more question. I don't want to go too long.
Yeah, there's one last question. What are some KPIs you recommend tracking during onboarding?
Well, of course, it depends about what's important at your company. So companies I've worked with, it might have been a certain within the first 30 days, a percentage of active users in the system, like they wanted 65% of licenses sold active in the system. It might be certain product usage. It might be that they're doing something specific in the product. It might be that they've reached some first value or time, how long it took for them to get to first value. So it needs to be what is important. I always like to say, find out what's important at your company, not just from an onboarding perspective, but what are executives interested in knowing? What are they reporting on to the board, and how can you tie your onboarding metrics into what the company cares about?
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much, Donna, for doing this with us. I think there is a question that's come up. Okay, that's a poll from us. Please go ahead and answer if you're interested in checking out our software. But thanks again, Donna, for taking the time to do this with us today and sharing all your insights, answering all the questions patiently as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. And please connect on LinkedIn and we can continue the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.